And welcome everyone. We should be live. I'm just gonna give it a minute until I can see that you are indeed in the chat. Welcome everyone. If you've just clicked on this video and you don't know what you're looking at, this is a live stream. So we are live from London. It's nearly 5 p.m. UK time. We are live from Tower Hamlets Cemetery in East London. If you're watching me live, feel free to say hello in the chat. If you're watching us on replay in the next few weeks or days, feel free to skip the next 8 minutes. We're just waiting for everyone to connect before it's officially time to get started. Let me know in the chat that you can hear me properly. And welcome, Linda. Oh, you have rain day, so you're not at the beach. Perfect. Well, perfect for me at least. Nice to have you here in the live. Now, some of you know the drill already. I'm going to have to test the microphone. So what I'll do is I'll tap it 3 times. Let me know in the chat whether you've heard it. Let me know if you've heard the 3 tapping. Because I've got a few connections between the cable on the phone, so they can easily get disconnected, or there could be a bit of dust in the connection or whatever. So we want to make sure that the sound is coming from the microphone and not from the telephone. Because if it came from the phone, you might hear a bit of wind. We don't want that. Loud and clear, perfect. You can hear and see well, perfect. Thanks for letting me know, guys. So we've got about, let me check, 6 minutes to go. 6 minutes before it's officially time to start. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. If anyone were completely new to me, you're very welcome. Let us know in the chat where you're connecting from. Hi, Ronnie. Nice to see you here. And for those of you that are watching the replay in the next few months or weeks, if you've never seen any of my live streams before, so you've got the chat. If you're watching me live, you should have the chat on the side or underneath the video if you're on a phone. And if you're watching the replay, if you wanted to have a replay of the chat, it is also possible. It should be somewhere down there. You should have chat replay, open the chat replay or whatever. And if you don't want to see the chat, that's absolutely fine. You just need to know that sometimes if you hear me say something very random and you're like, what is she on about? I might be reacting to something that happened in the chat. Usually, you know, when I get a question, I would try to rephrase the question so people would understand, but sometimes you get carried away and you forget to repeat what's in the chat. So if you wanted to have it open, it is an option. All right, let's see what time it is. 5 minutes to go, 5 minutes exactly. So if you're ready to make yourself a cup of tea, pop to the loo or grab a snack, you still have 5 minutes to do so. And after that, we'll go for a little live walk in Tower Hamlets Cemetery, one of those Victorian cemeteries in one of the Magnificent Seven, actually. And we are in East London, in Bow. It used to be called the Bow Cemetery, actually, when they first opened it. And let me flip this camera around. I'm now sitting in a little open-air classroom. See those little things? They are benches for the kids. This is early for my tour. Well, 5 p.m. But yeah, I guess it's early compared to the ones I do at night, late in the evening. So we've got about 4 minutes to go. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. Well, 3 minutes now to be precise. If anyone were completely new to me, let us know in the chat. And welcome, Mike. Nice to see you here. Salut. It's always nice to see familiar names. And it's lovely when we see new ones as well. So don't hesitate with the chat. Chat as much as you'd like. Don't be worried about distracting me. It is my job really to know how much I want to interact with the chat. So don't worry, chat away. And also, if any of you were not used to watch those live streams, if you watch the replay in the next few months or weeks, you may have some micro cuts every so often. That's what happens when I lose the signal. It should be fine for about 80% of the tour, but there's one particular spot on the other side I kind of have to go through where sometimes the signal drops for a few minutes. But I know where that is, so I'll be careful not to say anything of great interest at that point, because I know it might cut for a few seconds or even maybe a minute or so. But yeah, if you, because I think sometimes people watch those videos like they don't realize it's recorded live, so sometimes you might be like, what's happening? And sometimes you can actually get a funny sentence. I remember I had a cut in West Norwood Cemetery, and I was talking about Sir Horace Jones, the architect of the Tower Bridge. And I said, oh, this is Sir Horace Jones. Then it cut. And then I was at the next grave, which was a captain, a sailor. And so it went like, this is Sir Horace Jones, a sailor. He's not a sailor at all, because they were at least 25-second cut. So it looks like I'm saying something completely wrong. That's what happens when there's a little cut. Hi, Cheryl, welcome. Oh, you had a split screen with an ad. They've got some new ads on YouTube. The other day I had a new one that was like a pop-up, when you have the fun portrait. Yeah, so they're probably experimenting with new type of ads. It's funny though, because I keep getting some ads. They've completely, you think that Google, YouTube is Google, so you think they know so much about you. Yet I keep getting ads for Tai Chi classes for older men. Like men over 50. I am many things, but I'm not a man and I'm not over 50. And this morning I had one for, if you are a Brit born in the UK before 1980, I'm not a Brit and I'm not born before 1980. It's the worst targeting ever. So I don't know what they're doing with their ads these days, but hi Samantha, welcome. And welcome Marty. Let me see what Samantha is saying. Well, Samantha, I was wondering if, because the first hello I tried to type in the chat myself, it didn't go through. So they may have had some little bugs at YouTube as well. But it's working now, so all good. Right, let's see. Oops, what did I do? No. Uh-oh. Ah. Hold on, bear with me. Let's not panic. Let's close this. Sorry, there we go. I did not zoom in. I swear I didn't do it. Right. Apologies, you didn't need a massive zoom in into my eyes. I was just trying to see the time. Let's try again. Right, it is officially time to start. So welcome guys, welcome to Tower Hamlets Cemetery. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Natalie. And without further ado, let's go. Let me flip this camera around. So I'm in a lovely little outdoor classroom. They use it for the for the kids, you know, when they have any type of nature visit or Victorian cemetery visits or whatever it might be. Today the cemetery is used as a nature reserve as well, so you could come here to see the plants or the animals. The cemetery was opened in 1841. It's one of the Magnificent Seven. So for those of you that follow my tours quite regularly, I'm sure you've heard about the Magnificent Seven. They were those Victorian cemeteries that were opened on what was at the time the outskirts of London. Because what happened is London struggled to bury their dead. To give you an idea, from the year 1800 to the year 1840, thanks to the Industrial Revolution, the population of London had doubled already. So there were hardly enough spaces for the living, let alone the dead. So what happened is those little graveyards around the churches of London ended up completely saturated. There were just too many dead. They became very stinky, so much so that the ladies were not coming to the funerals anymore. It was too stinky for them. And eventually they had to find a solution. So they opened those 7 magnificent cemeteries on the outskirts of what was then London. So that's Tower Hamlet, Westnor Wood, Highgate, of course, Brompton Cemetery, Kensal Green as well. So those cemeteries were commercial cemeteries, and some of you might have visited quite a few with me in other tours. And in those very big cemeteries, often I'll show you some great monuments and I'll tell you about the people buried there. Today I'm not going to show you that many monuments, simply because Tower Hamlet, so East London, was a very poor area. We talked about that, of course, when we talked about Jack the Ripper and those destitute ladies. So, of course, a lot of people did not have money for a monument. Because, you know, when we see those Victorian cemeteries, sometimes we see the grand monuments, you know, lawyers or sea captains or merchants or politicians or whoever they may be, bankers. But today I'd like you to think about the people we cannot see. And we're talking about 80% of the graves over here. Well, at least in the 1960s, when the cemetery closed, 80% of the people that were buried here were in communal graves. So they probably never had a monument for most of them, and they were sharing their graves with a stranger. Oh, I just received I don't know what it was, an acorn or something dropped on me. So yeah, today I want you to think about those people. There are a few notable people buried here, but not as many as in other Victorian cemeteries. You, for example, have the captain of the owner of the Curtis Ark and stuff like that. But a lot of the people would have been pretty much unknown. And one of those ladies buried here that I wanted to tell you about today is a lady called Emily Kums. Emily Kums was a murder victim. We have very few murder victims I know of in the cemetery. You've got Emily, and you have another one that might or might not be a Jack the Ripper victim. There was a lady called Rose Millet that died in December 1888 in Poplar. We do believe she was strangled. What happened is she was also a sex worker and her body was found on the street. But the medical evidence were quite conflicting, let's say. The pathologist was not even sure that she had indeed been murdered. She probably had been murdered for sure. It's probably Anderson, the chief of the police, that did not want to tarnish even more the reputation of the Met, because, you know, they had not found out Jack the Ripper, so they probably wanted it to pass as an accident. The pathologist even said, oh, she might have choked on her own on her own apron or whatever she was wearing. I mean, how do you choke on your own items of clothing? I mean, unless you are extremely drunk, but even if, you know, so no, and there were traces of strangulation. So she could have been, well, she was most definitely a murder victim, and she could have been a Jack the Ripper victim as well, because we are not far. And that was only about a month and a half really after the Mary Kelly murder, so who knows. Anyway, I don't want to tell you too much about Jack the Ripper quite yet, because I did not want to make this tour about Jack the Ripper, although there are a few Jack the Ripper connections. I'll tell you about them at the end of the tour. But for now, let's get back to Emily Kums. Emily, she's buried somewhere on this side, somewhere against the wall down there. She was in a communal grave. She didn't have much money. The family was not extremely poor, but they were working class. And when she died, the two defendants being tried for her murder were her sons. And they were 12 and 13 years of age. They were called Robert Coombes and Nathaniel Kums. Let me show you their pictures. So that's Robert on the right, the 13 years old, and little Natty. So would you believe they were guilty of killing their mother? Hi Rosemary, and welcome everyone that just joined. So we are in the 1890s. At the time, you know, those kids, they kind of grew up in the shadow of Jack the Ripper. You know, those kids in the 1890s, some of them would have been reading the illustrated police news, you know. Some of them were reading those horrible penny dreadfuls. Some of the kids at school were actually every so often spotted playing Jack the Ripper, would you believe? So it probably was quite a shocking decade for children to grow in. And little Robert, he definitely had some dark interest. He was a great fan of penny dreadfuls. The penny dreadfuls, for the ones that don't know, they were a very cheap type of literature. They'd cost you a penny, because after they invented the printing press, that was much cheaper to print literature. And they were very often very dark and very often inspired by real murders. They were fictional, but they would often use the name of an actual murderer, and they were quite graphic, quite horrible, really. Little Robert was a great fan of them, apparently. And he had, you know what, he was so much into murders that he actually walked all the way to Chelmsford in Essex to go to the Assizes, to go to the trial of James Reed. James Reed, some of you may remember, we talked about him when I did a tour of Southern in Essex. He was the Southern murderer and bigamist. So the boy had left his family to go all the way down to Essex, partially on foot, because he had money for a train ticket, but not for the full journey. All of that to see a trial at the age of 12. I mean, you could see the boy had some dark interest. And his dad, Robert Sr., he worked on the ships. He worked for the National Steamship Company. He was crossing over the Atlantic to take mainly migrants to America. And he would be gone for weeks or months. Usually when he did that, he would give some money to his wife to survive for the few weeks or months until he's back. And off he went. And that's what happened. Robert Sr. had gone away. And the boys went to buy a knife with the intention of killing their mum. And one night, it does look like Emily might have been a bit violent with the boys. One night she was beating little Natty. You know, today those kids would be taken away by social services, of course, but at the time they didn't have such thing. Well, it was starting with Thomas Barnardo. We'll talk about him in a moment. But yeah, she might have been a bit violent with the boys. The extent of it, we don't know really. And Robert, so the bigger boy, he used to sleep with his mum in her bed when Daddy was away, which is a bit weird. They had some space. It's not hello, got a little friend. They had some space. It's not that. They had to sleep together, so that was a bit odd. And that night, in the middle of the night, he stabbed her in bed, and then he stayed in bed with her. Apparently, in the morning, he went to tell little Natty what he'd done. Little Natty did not believe him, so he came to the bedroom, and there was the mother. She wasn't dead yet. She was struggling for her life. Guess what they've done, the boys? They let the mum there, and they went to see cricket. So they went to a cricket match, and then of course she passed away. Then they kept on living their life. This is quite astonishing. They went to sell some of the watches and the items of clothing from their dad. So they went to the pawnbrokers to get some money. Then they even went to the docks to see the National Steamship Company to ask some money for the. They basically claimed that their mother was in hospital and that they needed an advance of their daddy's payment to pay for the medical fee. Then they went to the theater and stuff like that. Then at the docks they asked a friend, a family friend, well, a friend of the daddy, a guy called John Fox. He was about 40 years of age. He was described as quite simple-minded. I don't know whether he probably wasn't diagnosed with any learning difficulty or anything, but he probably wasn't thinking as well as some others. And they asked him if he could come and look after them. He said that, they said that their mum had gone to Liverpool, that she had lost an auntie and she went to Liverpool to collect an inheritance. So they asked Fox to come and stay with them at their house in Plaistow, and they'll pay him. And they were going to pay him more than what he would get at the docks. So Fox agreed, and he came to stay with the boys. After a few days, the family started to get a bit worried. The dad's sister, another Emily Kums actually, she decided to investigate because she found it very weird that Emily, her sister-in-law, would have left the boys alone. And one day she knocked at the door. Fox opened the door, and she'd never seen the guy before, and he was wearing some of her brother's items of clothing. So she was very suspicious, but the boys were like, no, she's gone to Liverpool. Then Emily came here, actually, on the street just there. That's where the grandmother used to live. So she went to ask the grandmother, do you think Emily could have gone up to Liverpool? Did anyone die in your family? And the grandmother said, no one passed away. So Emily, the auntie, was now convinced that something was very fishy. She went to the landlord to get some keys from all the bedrooms and everything. She knocked at the door. Little Robert opened the door, and I was like, "You go away. What do you want?" And he's like, "Mummy is away," and she's like, "No, I think your mum is here." She pushed the door. Little Natty escaped through the window. And as Emily went upstairs, she had the key, she opened the bedroom, and the poor victim, Emily Kums, was still there laying on her bed. She had been there for a week. Apparently the smell was unbearable. Apparently some of the neighbors had complained about the smell. I don't want to be too graphic, but apparently when the site was described at the court case, a lot of people passed away, including some police passed out. Sorry, not passed away. They passed out in the Old Bailey because apparently that was quite graphic. You know, apparently the body was full of maggots and quite horrible. And Natty was 13 years old. At the time, the age of what they would call reason or responsibility for crime was usually 14 for a boy, 16 for a girl, but he could have hanged. Actually, the last boy that was hanged would have been 1831. I think he was 14, a boy that also committed murder for 9 pence. There was a robbery. And but little Natty and Nathanael seemed to find it fairly funny. They were laughing at court and everything. Eventually, they decided to try to make it pass for insanity. And to an extent, it probably was, you know. So eventually, he was found guilty but insane, and he was sent to Broadmoor Hospital. Broadmoor it's a prison, but it's a hospital prison. It's for people that committed horrendous crimes, but that are not completely fit for trial, really. He was the youngest boy in Broadmoor until another boy, 17 years old, came to join him. We also talked about him when the other boy, when we went to Angel. It was a horrible case of a teenager that was killing babies. So yeah, those two were the two youngest in Broadmoor for many years. Eventually, Robert was released. 17 years later, I think he was 30 years of age when he was released. His little brother Natty had been acquitted. Fox as well. So the 40 years old that was staying with them in the house, he was acquitted as well. It's hard to believe that he didn't know anything because of the smell. If the neighbors could smell the thing, and Fox was indoors with them and couldn't smell it. But, you know, apparently he had a bit of a cold, and he was described as simple-minded, so he probably didn't put two and two together. Anyway, he was acquitted. And eventually, little Robert, that is now 30 years of age, when he was released, he moved to Australia, where he met his little brother. Little Natty had joined the Navy and then the Australian Navy. He had fought both world wars, actually. And so, yeah, when Robert was released, he moved to Australia as well. An interesting little footnote, really. It's that when he died many years later in Australia, you know, people that research the case, there's a book about it from Kate Summerscale about the full story. He had taken with him a little boy that was suffering from abuse, and he had given him a home on all that. So that's quite interesting. You know, he probably was abused by his mom. I mean, there might have been more to it, you know, for him to later on want to rescue a little boy from suffering from the same type of treatment. So we'll probably never know the full extent of what was happening in their home. But yeah, quite a horrible case, and definitely a very, very young killer. Now on this street, not this street, but this footpath over here, you'll see a few graves. A lot of them actually date back to the First World War. I mean, if you looked at the dates. Now, they are in this cemetery victims of 3 different horrible tragedies. The first one, it's people that would have died through the First World War, through the Silvertown explosion. That was an accident, a horrible accident. 73 lost their lives, 500 were injured. What happened is, through the First World War, the government decided to requisition a plant, a factory. In Silvertown, at the time, there were a lot of factories. It is said that at the time in Britain, every single household probably owned at least one item that had been manufactured in Silvertown. And it was very risky, but they started to use the factory to produce TNT, gunpowder, 9 tons a day. They knew there was a risk, but of course, you know, they needed to help the war effort. And anyway, one day there was a little fire that started in the building, and poof, the blast was huge. It destroyed 900 homes, killed a lot of people. Apparently, the fire could be seen all the way up to Guildford in Surrey. Apparently, the blow could be heard all the way to the Savoy Hotel on the Strand, you know, in central London, in Westminster. And the scenes were horrific. Apparently, there was one lady that broke 4 of her fingers because she was trying to save her little toddler from the debris, you know, from under the rocks and stuff. So you can imagine the horrors. And a lot of those victims are buried here. There's another disaster that we talked about in my tours before, 1878. So before, I don't know why I said the first one, not the first one, the Princess Alice disaster. We talked about the Princess Alice disaster when we talked about Elizabeth Stride. You know, the third Jack the Ripper victim. She was a lady that spent a lot of time in Poplar, so we're very close to Poplar. She was a bit of a manipulator, or maybe a pathological liar, who knows, but she did make up a lot of stories. And she had claimed to be a victim of the Princess Alice disaster, so she could benefit from some charity from people. So the Princess Alice disaster was a steamboat that would go down the river. It was leaving in the morning. They would go to Sheerness and Gravesend, like a day trip for wealthy Victorians. It was full of families and couple courting and all that. So they'd go down to Kent for the day, and then they'll come back late afternoon. They never really knew how many people were on board because it was an open return. So you'll buy a ticket, but then you could come with the 4:30 or 5:30 or 6 o'clock back. And the kids were traveling for free. So they never knew exactly how many people were on board. And on the way back from Kent, the Princess Alice actually went straight into another ship, a commercial ship called the Bywell Castle. And the Princess Alice, the ship was sliced into 2. So it sank in the river. That was a horrible disaster. At the time, a lot of people didn't know how to swim. So a lot of people drowned. And even the one that didn't drown, you know, at the time, the river was an open sewer. We are at the time when it was extremely dirty, so a lot of people that didn't die straight away would have caught some infections and stuff later on. And the victims were found all over the river. Some were found in the south, and that they were taken to Charlton Cemetery. And the ones that were found on the north bank of the river, a lot of them would have been buried here. Some would have been identified, some were not. It was horrible. We don't know exactly how many victims, probably as many as 700. Hi Marilyn, hi Sarah, hi Linda. Welcome everyone that I did not join in, greet in the chat. So yeah, quite a horrible sight, because imagine trying to, if you're not too sure whether your loved one was on board, imagine trying to go and identify those victims. You'd have to walk through 700 bloated blue bodies. After a week, they had to bury them. You know, they was too stinky. But what they did is they stripped the bodies from the items of clothing. So they kept some of the items of clothing with a number. So if you came a bit later, you could still try to identify the items of clothing to see if your loved one was dead. So that was the worst disaster ever on the River Thames, so yes, some of the victims are buried here. And there was another disaster that happened through the Second World War, where a lot of the victims were also buried here, It is the Bethnal Green tube disaster. So if we go back to the time of the Second World War, you know, of course, we had the Blitz. Blitz apparently literally means lighting in German. So of course, London was bombed quite dramatically. Mainly at the beginning of the war, you know, like in 1941. So we had in the evening what they called those blackouts. So the streets of London had to be dark, very dark. So the German bombing would not be able to find their way around. So the streets were so dark, you couldn't even have a candle at your window or anything. It had to be pitch black. Even the traffic, you know, the London buses, they would keep running, but they didn't have any lights on. So there were a lot of traffic accidents as well because of that. And in 1943, so, you know, at the beginning of the Blitz, a lot of the kids were evacuated to families on the countryside, you know. That's the beginning of the Narnia movie, you know, those kids going away and then they find an entrance to Narnia. Anyway, so a lot of kids actually started to come back eventually because in 1943, it had started to be a little bit quieter in terms of actual bombs, but people would still spend the night in the underground to be protected, to be safe in a bomb shelter. So about 4 p.m. they started to go down, you know, every night. It would have been an interesting life because although it was wartime, life went on, you know. People kept dancing, working, eating, dating, you know. If you wanted to see, there's a movie about that period of time in London that's very well done. It's an old movie, but it's called It's a Lovely Day Tomorrow. And it's a very good movie to see the life that would have happened in the underground at the time. For those of you that were with me last week, this is Canary Wharf there. This is the HSBC building there. So we're very close to where we were last week when we went to the Docklands area. Anyway, so one night, what happened is the sirens went on like if there was a bomb. It wasn't actually a bomb. It was anti-rocket things that had been fired. But anyway, people believed that was a bomb alert, so they rushed down the underground. There was a bus number 8 that stopped in Bethnal Green, and a lot of people got off the bus and they rushed into the underground. That was quite dark. Well, there was a little light inside, but the light bulb was painted in black, so it wouldn't be too bright. And there was a lady carrying a baby that tripped and fell. And then a lot of other people fell on top of her. And but people kept rushing into the tube. And then there's a phenomenon that is absolutely horrible. I know because it happened to me as a football game. You know, if you have too many people stacked on top of you, I say on top, it's not even really on top. When it happened to me at the football game, I wasn't laying down, I was against some kind of a barrier, but I had like 12 guys kind of on top of me. You can't physically breathe. You can't move your rib cage. It's very, very scary. Some people refer to it as vertical stacking. So anyway, you had those people that had fallen down at the front, and then everyone that kept rushing in, and then all those people that were asphyxiated. More than half of them died. So there were about 300 people rushing into the tube, but I think it's 173 dead. 27 men, 80-something, 84 ladies, I think, and like 60 kids. I mean, it was horrible. And the thing is, people kept coming in because they didn't quite realize what was happening. So they kept rushing in and in. Apparently, it took 4 hours to remove the bodies. Imagine that. And when they removed all the bodies, they found the body of a famous pickpocket, a famous thief in the area. So the pickpocket might have actually kind of used the panic to try to steal from people's pocket, and he might have actually have tried to make it worse. So yeah, quite a horrible disaster. And that was not published into the press at the time. Same for the Silverton explosion, actually, because the press did not want the Germans to hear about it. They didn't want to give them ideas. It is said that even some of the journalists actually tried to bribe the kids, you know, the kids that survived, to have some information. So it was only published after the war, you know, what really happened. There was a bit of a debate because the authorities claimed that there was a panic, and it's the panic that created the tragedy, when some people that witnessed it and survived said there was no panic actually, just that the entrance was very dangerous. So yeah, quite a horrible disaster. Today we have a new monument that has been placed at Bethnal Green station. It's very new, it's been since 2017. It's called Stairway to Heaven. Let me show you. I should take you to Bethnal Green one day. There's some Dickens connections as well down there, and we should try to do that one day. So you see, it's kind of like it's the stairway upside down, but with some lots of the names of the victims as well. Some of the victims were from the Lechmere family. Lechmere, you might know that name because he's a Jack the Ripper suspect, a very good one. I'll tell you about him a bit more in a moment, because he's buried here. So Jack the Ripper might be buried in this cemetery. He's a very good suspect, but he's one of the many. By the way, there was also a murder here in the cemetery. I didn't know about it until last Saturday, when on Saturday night I was like, let me ask ChatGPT if there was any murders that ever occurred in the cemetery, which is a very odd question to ask, right? Because why would there be? Well, guess what? There was one. It was not that long ago, and actually the very weird thing is that the evening when I googled it was actually the anniversary of the murder. The murder would have happened at the same time, pretty much, at the very moment where I googled it, which is weird. Anyway, it's a very sad case. It's a chap called Eric Field, 38 years old, that had some kind of fantasy about murdering a stranger, and he bought a hammer. And one night he was waiting here in the cemetery, not even proper night, but like one evening, and yeah, fate exactly. And he's there's a man, a 50 years old man called Ranjit. He was from Sri Lanka originally. He was studying here to become an accountant, and he had all his family in Sri Lanka and loved ones. He was just crossing the cemetery on his way home, I suppose, when he was brutally attacked by this complete stranger. At least 12 hammer blows, and that killed him. They found in the murderer's phone, in Eric's phone, they found a lot of horrific videos of murders with hammers and stuff. So the guy had, I mean, horrible case really, but so yeah, it happened right here inside of the cemetery. Oh, thanks ever so much, Linda. That's greatly appreciated. Now let me show you this little monument. This is a very moving monument to the Blitz. It is it's made with bricks that would have been gathered from some of the buildings that were bombed. So you see the bricks are not all the same. They're probably sometimes from even different buildings. So nice little memorial. There's another lady that's a bit of the heroes of this area. A lady called Anna Billing. She's not buried here, she's buried in Israel. But she was a doctor. She was a lady doctor in 1925. That was quite rare. She was a lady that really, she was known as the Angel of Cable Street. She worked in the bomb shelters and she helped people. She would treat people whether they could pay or not, because of course at the time a lot of people couldn't afford to go to the doctor. And often they would wait until the very last minute, when they knew they really had to go to the doc. And through the war, she was helping so many in the bomb shelters. She even got injured herself. She had a broken leg with a bomb, and she kept helping. She kept helping people in the shelters and stuff. So very impressive lady. Now, let me show you one monument here. I said I wouldn't show you many monuments today, but I need to show you this one. This is Will Crooks. We very briefly talked about him last week when we were at the docks. We talked about the dockers that had a job that was very, but they never knew how much work they'll get, because they never knew how many ships would arrive in London that day. So sometimes they'll wake up, they'll turn up at work and they wouldn't have any work. And it was very terribly paid. And they had the big strikes at the docks in 1889. Will Crooks was actually one of the people that run it. And it became, yes, Linda, the bricks of the monument were they were picked up from buildings that were destroyed by the Blitz. Yeah, exactly. And Will and his wife Elizabeth, they're buried here. So after the strikes at the docks, he actually became the first Labour mayor of Poplar, and he's actually one of the first ever of the Labour Party. The Labour Party actually they've redone the grave lately. I mean they've redone it so he can be remembered. He then became a member of Parliament and all that. So he was a poor docker. He had a childhood a bit like Oliver Twist, in and out of the workhouses and stuff. And then he became a great politician. So quite cool. Anyway, now I'm gonna try not to say anything of great interest for the next minute or so, because sometimes I have a dip of signal over here. So if it doesn't happen, it doesn't matter. We'll chit chat, but I don't want to say anything too interesting right now, because I know it. The last two times, actually, the last two times I did a live in this cemetery, I had a little dip in signal in this corner. So we'll just wait until I know the signal is good. Let me know in the chat if you lose me or not. It might be fine, but I know it can be frustrating, when I'm in the middle of an interesting story and then it cuts and then you've missed some information and then you don't understand anything. So I'll just stop talking until I know it's fine. Are you still here? Has it cut at all? Maybe not. If it doesn't, that's quite typical, when you expect it, then it doesn't happen. I'll go another maybe 40 meters and then it's fine, usually. I don't know why, it's always in this very corner that there's the gods of the internet that are not with me. But it seems fine today, at least the app is not telling me that I've dropped any of the signal. Everything I say is interesting. Thank you. You're still here, okay, cool. Right. In the story, but there are about I think it's 513 kids that have been buried here in Tower Hamlets Cemetery. They are the Barnardo's charity children. So they were extremely poor boys and girls that have been helped by Dr. Barnardo. and they would have died into his care, so they were buried here. He's helped over 8,000, and of course some of them died. At the time, you know, a lot of kids died. 1 out of 5 would not survive until the age of 5 anyway in Victorian times. Thomas Barnardo, he was born in Ireland. He, in his autobiography, he describes himself as a boy that was a bit selfish. He wasn't particularly nice or generous as a boy. And when he grew up, he decided to become a doctor, and he decided to help. At first, he wanted to become a missionary in China, and then he realized that there was no need to go all the way down to China, that there was a lot of poverty right here under his nose in London. And what he did is he created a rag school. A rag school where school, because at the time, you know, you had to pay for schools and stuff. So a lot of those kids could not access an education at all. So he started a rag school, and he had a child himself. I think he had 7 children, but one of them suffered from Down syndrome. So he wanted to make sure he would teach everyone. And of course, some of the schooling was a bit messy, because those kids were not used to school at all. They didn't really know how to concentrate on anything, so he would help them anyway. And one day at school, there was a little boy that did not want to go. He wanted to stay in the school. He wanted to sleep in the school. And Barnardo was like, "No, mate, you've got to go, Jim." His name was Jim Jarvis. And it was like, Barnardo was like, "You've got to go home." And Jim was like, "I've got no home, sir." So Barnardo was a bit curious. He was like, "But where do you sleep then?" And he said, "Well, on a roof." And Barnardo then asked the little Jim Jarvis if he could show him where he slept. So he took him on a roof. When I say a roof, I mean a roof, not an attic or anything. A roof. There was a roof that had been, apparently there was a bit of a shelter, but it was still very much exposed to the elements. So he decided to open those kind of orphanages, you know, those homes for boys and later on girls. He wanted to give them a place to stay. He then, so he opened those orphanages. And one day he had a few space. He had only a handful of spaces available. So he went to the Billingsgate Market, the old one, not the one we saw last week. Last week we saw the new one in the docks, but the old one in the city of London, because a lot of boys were begging there, or sometimes doing odd jobs at the fish market. And he went to see those boys, and he told them, "I've opened a place where you can come and stay." And a few boys volunteered. They were like, "Yeah, we want to come and stay." So he was then full. And then there's another boy that came from behind. He was like, me, sir, take me, sir." And Barnardo was like, "Oh, I'm ever so sorry. I don't have enough space anymore. I only had a few spots. But what's your name?" And he said, "Oh, I'm John. I'm just John Summers, sir." And then someone said at the back, "No, we call him Carrots." So Barnardo was like, "Okay, Carrots, I tell you what, come back next week. At the same time next week, I'll have more space by then, and I'll give you a space, okay?" And little Carrots say, "Yes, sure." And Carrots was a bit fragile, you know, and a few days later, he was found dead on a pile of sugar. I don't know why they have sugar in a fish market, but yeah, the boy was dead, and that's when Barnardo was, of course, ever so sorry. So Barnardo decided that never ever would anyone be rejected from his orphanages. So he had a sign, actually, "No destitute boys ever rejected." And he helped thousands. He also had a place for girls as well, and he's buried there, actually, in the one he had in Barkingside. well, buried. He was cremated, which is quite rare for a man of his days, but his ashes are buried there, I think. So yeah, interesting gentleman, lovely charity. They still exist today, the Barnardo's charity. You might have seen some of those charity shops on the street. I think there's one in Brixton, sometimes I go there. And also you might remember, you know, after the Queen passed away, Queen Elizabeth II that is, a lot of people brought some little Paddington bears to Buckingham Palace and Green Park and even Hyde Park. The palace said, stop bringing Paddington bears because they didn't know what to do with them. So then people started to bring marmalade sandwiches, which is cool. It fed the foxes, I guess, and maybe the rats as well. But anyway, those Paddington bears, they had over 1,000 after the Queen's funerals, and Camilla gave them to the Barnardo's charity. They were washed, of course, but then Camilla is not a patron of Barnardo's. The Queen used to be. But yeah, so you might have heard about the charity. Now, there was a bit of controversy as well. Already at the time of Barnardo. Barnardo was, well, first he had been accused of kidnappings, would you believe? Because some of those kids were not actually orphans, but they were badly treated. Their parents were alcoholics. They were starving. Sometimes they were given gin to stop the syndromes of starvation. And yes, sometimes Barnardo did take the right to remove some of those kids from those horrible. Apologies, I've just lost you for a sec, but hopefully it wasn't too long. So yeah, he was actually accused of kidnapping as well as of faking some before and after pictures. He had realized the impact of photography. And what he would do sometimes, he would take a picture of those rags kids before they came into his homes. And then, let me show you some examples here. And then he would show a picture of them later on, having been trained into a particular trade or going to school. He was accused of faking those photographs, which was probably partially true, but that was for a good cause, you know, because he wanted some donations, you know, like any charity. That's how they run. Interestingly, one of the guy that accused him, he was another philanthropist. He was another guy, Frederick Charrington. I'll tell you about him in a second, but for now, let me show you the monument. So this is the monument. It's a lady called Jean Clark that was herself helped by the Barnardo's charity. She decided to raise £10,000 to have a monument done for all those kids, for all those 500 and so kids that have been buried here with no monument. So that's for all the kids from the Barnardo's charity. It's very dirty. I mean, it's much dirtier than it was last time I came. It is Portland stone. Apparently, Portland stone, it cleans itself, which I don't understand. I've read that so many times, but I don't understand how a stone can clean itself. But apparently it does. So yeah, beautiful, very moving monument. And so yeah. So Barnardo was accused, and one of the gentlemen that accused him, Frederick Charrington, was a very interesting guy as well. He was another philanthropist. Charrington was the heir of a brewery. So his business that made him fairly rich was alcohol. And it is said that one day he was outside of a pub, one of his own pubs. You know, at the time, the pubs, they worked with the breweries. And he spotted a man that was being violent with his wife or girlfriend. And at that point, Charrington decided to drop his business, drop the alcohol completely, and fight against alcoholism and prostitution. And so he completely dropped the alcohol industry, and he started to become a philanthropist in his own field. This is the Westwood Monument, this one. So that was a rich merchant, but we don't care about rich people today, we said. And so Charrington, he helped a lot, to be honest, with prostitution. Yet he's the one that accused Barnardo's. He actually also accused Catherine Booth and William Booth, you know, the founders of the Salvation Army. Talking about Catherine Booth, I think she helped a lot with the Princess Alice disaster as well. We talked about it earlier. So yeah, Charrington is an interesting guy because he's also a Jack the Ripper suspect, would you believe? Well, not a very good one, actually a terrible one. But there was a ripologist that wanted to make a case. He wrote a book called The Mammoth Book of Jack the Ripper, in which he built up a case against Charrington, like if he could be Jack the Ripper, which is quite frankly ridiculous. But he wanted to highlight the fact that it's very easy to build up a case against any Victorian man, really. Because with the Jack the Ripper story, what we have to remember is that, of course, many ladies died, but also many men had their lives destroyed because they were wrongly accused at some point. And then the suspicion or the doubt would follow them, you know, the rest of their lives. So yeah, he wanted to show how you could build up a case against anyone. So his case against Charrington is that Charrington had, he did manage to close a lot of brothels. He created a system with which you could snitch on your neighbors. You know, if you suspected that there might have been a brothel next door, you could flag it to the authorities, and a lot of brothels were closed. Some argued that doing that, it actually pushed prostitutes into the streets and into the hands of Jack the Ripper. Anyway, it's a bit bonkers, but that's the theory. Now, talking about Jack the Ripper, there are a few Jack the Ripper connections in the in this cemetery. First, Charles Cross or Lechmere, one of the Jack the Ripper suspects, is buried here somewhere. Let me show you Charles Cross. That's the man. He's the one that found Polly Nichols' body, the first victim, well, the first one of the canonical five. The original photograph is the one on the left, of course. He's buried here somewhere. He was from a local family in the East End. They used to sell cat food. Well, horse meat. You know, at the time, you had a lot of horses, of course, everywhere. When they were too old, they had to be slaughtered. Their meat was being sold for cat food. And that was the family business. And some ripologists now believe that when he was in the process of finding Polly Nichols, you know, there's another gentleman that arrived and he was just overlooking the body. Some ripologists now believe that he was not in the process of finding the body, but in the process of killing her. It's, I mean, he's a good suspect because, well, first he lied about his name. He told the police his name was Charles Cross. Cross was his father-in-law, a bigamist. So he's a good suspect because, well, because he was there. He's not necessarily my favorite suspect, but he could very, very well be Jack the Ripper. If you wanted to hear a bit more about Lechmere, there's a ripologist, his name is Edward Stowe. He's got a YouTube channel called House of Lechmere. He's done a tremendous amount of research on the case. Anyway, so he's buried here somewhere. There's another gentleman that's buried here. It is Mr. Lusk. You know, cool, it should be better now. Hi Tanya, welcome everyone, that's a bit late. I have lost you for a sec, so I'm just gonna repeat what I was saying. I was saying that Mr. Lusk is buried here somewhere. He was the boss of the Whitechapel Vigilante Committee. So he was the one that received some of those letters, you know, that were allegedly sent by Jack the Ripper. Most of them were probably hoaxes, but some ripologists argue that some of them might be truthful. And anyway, talking about Jack the Ripper, well, you know what? Even if Jack the Ripper was a completely different suspect, he could be buried here anyway. Because, of course, a lot of local people from the East End would have been buried here at the time. So, you know, even if it wasn't Lechmere, he could be buried here anyway if it was an anonymous random local lunatic or anyone. He could be somewhere here. But there's another gentleman that's buried here that is somehow connected to the Ripper story. I'll show you his grave. He was a doctor. He was the doctor that did the autopsy on Polly Nichols. So Polly was the first victim of the canonical five. The five ladies that most ripologists agree on as victims. He was probably a great doctor, but he is one of those people that are probably only remembered now because of their connection to the Ripper story. So this is the monument. Let me show you his name. Llewellyn, his name is. I hope I pronounce it properly. There he is, Rhys Ralph Llewellyn. So that's the doctor that did the autopsy on Polly Nichols. Interestingly, at first, he actually believed that the mutilations, on the reproductive organs might have been done first. But that's very unlikely. We think we know that Jack the Ripper was actually first slicing their throat, and then when he had time, doing those horrible mutilations and removing some of the organs sometimes, at least when he was not interrupted. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. Let me know if you have any... Oh no, there's one more Jack the Ripper connection I didn't tell you. Barnardo himself, Thomas Barnardo, he somehow has a connection to the Jack the Ripper story. Apparently one day he went to a doss house, a lodging house on Flower on Dean Street. For those of you that have followed my Jack the Ripper tour, you would have been with me on Flower on Dean Street. He went in there because he wanted to speak to the ladies about having kids in lodging houses. And one day he was in the kitchen in one of those doss houses, and he met some ladies that were just chatting in the kitchen, and one of them was a tall brunette, and she was a bit drunk, and she said to him, "We all up to no good, and no one cares what becomes of us. Perhaps one of us could be killed next. If we had helped the life of us years ago, we would have never come to this." He believes that this lady might have been Elizabeth Stride. If he's right, well, she was indeed killed next. But the truth is, any of those ladies, they were all in the same boat, they were all struggling, they were all doing whatever they could to feed themselves or pay for a roof for the night. So any of them could have been killed next. Well, we never know. It could have been her, but who knows? Anyway, let me show you my face again. We are now by the main entrance, by the way, so that's the main entrance of the cemetery. It might or might be still open. I don't need the main entrance anyway. This cemetery is open 24/7. So if you wanted to scare yourself and come at night, you can. I think they do some Halloween stuff sometimes. So yeah, I'm not, for once, I'm not scared of being locked in like I am sometimes in West Norwood or Brompton or any other cemeteries I do lives in. Yeah, I should come to the US. Greenmount Cemetery, cool. I should put that on my wish list of places I want to go to one day. Thanks, Tanya. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, everyone, for coming today. If you wanted to see a bit more of me, next Sunday, not this Sunday, the one after, we're going back to Chiswick, where we also have some Jack the Ripper connections, would you believe? There's a suspect that was found there in the river, Montague Druitt. So that's next week, Sunday. And after that, for September, I've not done the scheduling yet, but there'll be some more coming up. If any of you were completely new to me If you've made it that far into the video, you might want to consider subscribing. If you want to make sure you join the live, it's more fun to be in the live, so you can interact in the chat and stuff. The best way is to subscribe to the channel and hit the little notify me button or whatever it's called. This way you'll get an email or a notification, if you allow them, when I go live, so you can join us in the lives next time. Thanks Marilyn, thanks Linda. Oh yes, absolutely. I should go to Rochester as well in New York State to go to see Tumbletee's grave. That's also on my list of places I should see one day. But there are so many, and life is too short to go everywhere. Anyway, thanks everyone for coming today. If any of you dropped me a little tip on Buy Me a Coffee or on PayPal, although I don't see them live in the chat, it's very, very much appreciated. If you prefer to do it on YouTube, you can as well. That's also an option. It is really Montrop Cemetery. Oh, too many cemeteries to see. I mean, even in the UK, there are many I need to go and explore. Oh, you are in Rochester, so I know where to come for a tea then when I go and see his grave. And well, I'm inviting myself. Anyway, thanks for coming, guys. Hopefully I'll see you next week. If not, I'll see you probably in September somewhere. Have a great evening. Laurel Hill in Philadelphia is great. Oh, too many. And yeah, have a great evening, a great morning, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.